Hi, it's another Tasty Tuesday on Christy's A+ Cooking. This week's theme is X is for extra special recipes. And I am actually highlighting two special recipes. The first one is my mom's cinnamon rolls, and the second one is Grandma Norma's mac and cheese. We're going to start off by making the cinnamon roll dough first because it has to rise for an hour. So I have already heated up 2 cups of milk. I've scalded it, and the recipe calls for either half a cup of oil or shortening. I always use shortening because that's what my mom used, and it's hot enough so it's going to melt the shortening. And while that is melting, we're going to add 2 eggs. We're going to whip them up a little bit, and we're going to let the yeast mix together. It calls for 2 packages of rapid rise yeast, or if you buy it at Costco. And this is a yeast spoon that I got at King Arthur Flour. It's great. Measures it out. And you're going to use a half a cup of lukewarm water and stir that up. And it's going to dissolve. And our shortening is starting to melt. I have shared this recipe when I highlighted my mom as my Wednesday Wonder, but I've never showed how to make it because it's a really great recipe. It was actually her roll recipe, and then she made it into cinnamon rolls. We're also going to add a half a cup of sugar. I think I'll try to make it with stevia sometime, so it's less sugar. And 2 teaspoons of salt. And we're going to mix that around. And then I'm just going to beat my eggs. And the great thing about this recipe is you don't have to knead it. My mom is very funny. When she would give people this recipe, she would say it would take 6 to 7 cups of flour because she didn't want it to be perfect like hers. And I've decided that 6.5 cups of flour is almost perfect. So the shortening's almost melted. I usually keep it on the stove so it has a little more heat, but I wanted to mix it over here because it's easier to see. I'm going to go ahead and add the eggs next. And it should be only lukewarm now so that we can add our yeast in just a minute. I've already measured out my flour. Like I said, I use 6.5 cups. The recipe says 6 to 7. And depending on the kind of flour that you have, you might need a little bit more. It's kind of a sticky dough. And so when you roll it out, you will need. You're gonna need about 3 hours to make this. It's very easy to make, but it's just all of the rise times because it has to rise twice. So I'm just going to make sure the yeast is all dissolved. I think I've shared before that my mom always made cinnamon rolls at Christmas time for all of her friends and my dad's faculty at Ladera, and I've kind of carried on that tradition. And I think we're almost done. And we're going to add the yeast in. And then we're just going to stir the flour in. And that's about it. After it's all stirred in, you're going to see that it's a kind of a sticky dough. I'm actually going to probably add a little bit more flour, especially when I roll it out. Like I said, you never know. That's kind of sticky, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour. Now that looks more like my mom's dough. It's all nice and mixed in. And then we're just going to put it over on the stove to rise. And then we're going to make the macaroni and cheese. Now we're going to make Norma Luce's macaroni and cheese. We've already cooked 2 cups of macaroni. So now we're going to make the sauce. You're going to use 2 cups of chicken broth, and you're going to heat it, and you're going to add a 1/3 cup of mayonnaise or mayo and a 1/3 cup of sour cream, and you're going to stir that till it's nice and warm. Then we're going to add 3 cups of cheddar cheese, and then add the macaroni, and then we'll put it in the pan that's already pre-sprayed. And then we're going to bake it on 350 for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to add some more cheese on top and bake it for about 15 more minutes. So it takes about 45 minutes, which will be perfect because then our roll dough will be ready to roll out to make our cinnamon rolls. I wanted to share a neat story while that's heating up about this macaroni and cheese. Norma made it for every family dinner. Christmas, Thanksgiving, because the kids loved it. And one of my favorite memories is we were having a ward dinner, and she came in kind of late, and she was carrying in her pan of macaroni and cheese, and I said, Norma, just forget it. Just bring it over to our table. We don't want to share it. My girls love it. In fact, when I go and visit Lindsay in California, she always makes me make a double batch so she can have a lot of leftovers. Anyway, it's going to take a minute for us to heat up. Just going to stir it. It's very easy to make, and it's very tasty. I'm hoping that everybody will share their favorite extra special recipes this week on my Facebook page. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And it starts to melt. And then we're going to add, actually I'm going to add my seasonings. You can use seasoning salt. You can pretty much add whatever you want to. The nice thing about it is you can use whichever cheese you want. If you like really sharp cheese, you can use that. If you like a more milder, you could use mild cheddar or Jack cheese. We love Colby Jack. I've said this a million times, that our family loves Colby Jack. So I'm just going to add in the macaroni and stir that in. And it bakes. Norma puts the cheese on before she bakes it for 45 minutes. I kind of like it to just cook for 15 minutes. So I changed that recipe up a little bit. but it's fabulous no matter which way you do it. You can see my cheese is melting, and then you're gonna turn off your stove and pour the macaroni in your prepared pan. And then you just put it in your oven for 30 minutes or 45, whichever you want to do first. And we'll see you in 35 minutes. It's been 45 minutes and the macaroni and cheese is ready to come out of the oven. We're gonna be looking forward to eating that tonight. And tomorrow, we're gonna have hamburgers with fried macaroni and cheese on top. Anyway, that's what Chelsea thinks. So our dough has doubled in size and then some. And I just punched that down. I made a double recipe, so if you don't need to make a whole lot, you might want to cut the recipe in half. I'm just going to add a little bit of flour because it was still kind of sticky. And then I just divide it in half. And I'm also going to put, I have a pastry rolling mat out just because I didn't want to mess up my granite countertop. So you're just going to put your dough down, and I'm going to be using my Pampered Chef rolling pin. It's a one-arm wonder. And you're gonna roll it out into a rectangle. I'm guessing it's about a 12 by 15 rectangle. Your dough's gonna be about a 1/3 inch thick. I have softened my butter, and you're just gonna spread it on. And you're gonna have cinnamon sugar. I like a lighter cinnamon, so for every cup of sugar, I put about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon in it. Because I made a double batch, I'm gonna use about half a stick of butter. Spread it out. And then I'm just gonna put the cinnamon sugar on top. It doesn't have to be completely covered, just a light. And then I use brown sugar. I don't think my mom used to put as much brown sugar in it as I do, but it almost makes like a sticky bun. My mom also used to add raisins, and sometimes she would add nuts, but most people don't like raisins, and a lot of people can't eat nuts. And then you're just gonna roll it into like a jelly roll. And then you're gonna cut it. I always use my pizza cutter. Some people use floss and cut it that way. It makes a nice clean cut, but I like to use my pizza cutter. And then you're just gonna place it on your cookie sheet and let it rise for about 45 to an hour, double in size. This recipe makes about 36 big cinnamon rolls. And I usually put 3 across and then 2. Just like the way it lays out on the pan that way. I lined my cookie sheet with parchment paper. I don't think any more is going to fit on that because I don't want it to fall off. And then I'm going to repeat. I'm going to cover it up again with a towel and let it rise, and then we'll come back and put them in the oven, and I'll show you how to make the frosting. It's been an hour, and as you can see, they're nice and ready to go in the oven. So I preheated my oven to 350. And they're gonna take about 15 to 20 more minutes. While those are baking, I'm gonna go ahead and make the frosting. You're gonna melt 1 stick of butter, and you're gonna add, I'll take that off the burner, about 5 cups of powdered sugar, and about 1/2 cup of half and half. I really like the half and half because it makes it nice and creamy. And then about a teaspoon of vanilla. And you're just gonna stir it. And depending on how thick you want it, you might need to add a little more half and half, or add a little bit of powdered sugar. This makes a really nice glaze for them. And believe it or not, this makes enough for all of those rolls that we just finished making. And you can see it'll just wait while they bake. I baked the cinnamon rolls for about 17 minutes. That's how they took to be nice light brown. And then I cooled them for about 5 minutes before I decided to frost them. You just take a spoonful, spread it on nice and thin. And what's really fun is, if it's for a holiday, you can put some kind of sprinkles on it. And for Valentine's Day last week, I made the frosting pink. I think my next door neighbors are going to be pretty happy to receive these in a few minutes. Thanks for watching Taste